Welcome to Moving Up North.
I'm Harry Gray.
And I'm Will York. And on today's episode, we've got interviews with Mandie Shilton Godwin, who's a Manchester City councillor. She did a lot of work for the Chorlton Cycleway project.
And we're talking to Layla Seibert, who has been fundamental in setting up Kidical Mass, 600 kids and families participating in a mass cycle event across the city centre. So we've got a packed show today. And we'll also give you a little update on Will's holiday.
So yeah, let's start with that. I've been on holiday.
And as an active person, you've been on a
fairly active holiday. So we packed bikes and walking stuff and camping gear into the car. It is amazing how much you can fit in the back of a Fiesta, by the way.
A hatchback?
Yeah. But we don't have a bike rack that fits it, so it's literally just everything gets crammed in the back. I learned how to take the back seats out, not just fold them down, but literally remove the back seats.
So we're turning into a car podcast now, are we?
Yeah. But it's still sort of active travel related, because I found that my largest Allen key that I have for working on a bike is just about big enough to take the bolt out for the rear seats in a Fiesta.
So a proper good multi-tool you've got there, yeah. So what have you been up to on this walking plus cycling holiday?
So we went to Arran, Mull, and then Aberfoyle. And I wanted to talk about our trip to a brief foray to Aberfoyle, or Gravelfoyle, as they've branded it, on the way back. Because I think this has a bit of an interesting parallel in Greater Manchester.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because Manchester is a commuter city, A to B city on a bike, people utility riding, but it's also a city surrounded by green space. It's surrounded by areas of outstanding natural beauty. We've got the Peak District, we've got Winter Hill, we've got lots of interesting and nice landscapes, and leisure cycling and leisure walking are actually a big part of the active travel sort of movement in Greater Manchester.
Yeah, so we've got the GM Ringway project. Hopefully we'll have some people from that on the podcast as guests at some point in the near future. So the GM Ringway is like a walking route around all of Greater Manchester. As far as cycling goes, obviously there are like community groups and clubs and leisure riding clubs around. But I was wanting to talk about Tameside Council, because Tameside have some of the best access to the Peak District and mountain bike riding in Greater Manchester. And the council recognised that. The council have recently produced a document that says they want to make Tameside a mountain biking destination. Now that sounds pretty good. It's not the kind of thing Walk Ride are usually into, right? Because we're usually all about utility cycling, those day-to-day trips. And maybe would you think it's fair to say we're a bit sceptical when Tameside said they were focusing on mountain biking?
Well, I think it's an interesting one, because it can be, in the past maybe, or even in the present, it is an excuse for councils to not really focus on everyday journeys, is to sort of palm it off into a sort of leisure space. We've seen that with a lot of councils across the country, actually. But I think with a campaign like Walk Ride GM and a city that's moving in the B network direction, I think there is space for a council to focus on leisure and utility cycling.
I mean, I feel like Tameside's vision is that they'll attract loads and loads of mountain bikers first to ride their great mountain bike trails, and then the sort of uptake of on-road cycling or utility cycling will follow naturally as more people are around the area on bikes. Now, I don't know, we could get into whether or not that's likely to happen, but I think the thing that I noticed in Aberfoyle, which is Aberfoyle is sort of west of Stirling, by the way, sort of in the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs region of Scotland. And what's happened there is a community interest group called Bike Trossachs have started getting trails waymarked, gravel trails waymarked, because as you know, gravel cycling is like the new road cycling. It's like the new be-all and end-all. They've partnered with the National Park Authority, Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, Forests and Land Scotland, Forth Valley Leader and the Strathard Community Trust. Now, those partnerships mean that they've been able to get really good signposting, like the trails all start from a car park, like, which is easily accessible. They link up to the National Cycle Network. Scottish Water have provided water bottle refill points. There's like tool stations to fix your bike up at the side. And I'd really love Tameside councillors to take a trip up there, basically, and see, like, if you want to go for leisure cycling, if you want to make yourself a destination for leisure cycling, this is what it takes. And it's not that hard. And Tameside have kind of begun already with the Tame Valley Loop, but I don't think, like, Tameside should pretend that waymarking just the one or two trails and not creating sort of a town centre destination to start and finish them is enough.
Yeah, and I think also it just needs to be considered as part of a wider sort of branding package. Like, it's got to be something like similar to the North Coast 500 in the sense that it's like it's something that they can market as a destination. And I think the Peak District's kind of getting there with stuff like this. We're seeing more and more of these kind of leisure routes, opening up. The Monsell Trail has just been expanded to the White Peak Loop, which is going to be a 42-mile circular trail for walking, cycling, and horse riders. The Peak District has so much to offer, and there's a lot of road cycling in the Peak District, but there's also a lot, of untapped potential for these sort of off-road leisure routes that could really open up Manchester as the sort of gateway to that kind of activity.
Welcoming to the podcast studio for the second time, we have Mandie Shilton Godwin, who is a Labour councillor in Chorlton Park.
That's right.
Chorlton Park. And I knew that because Mandie was here before and corrected me when I got it wrong last time. And we managed to accidentally delete the entire session's recordings.
Yeah, we did. So our SD card corrupted as we finished interviewing the leader of Trafford Council, Mandie. So yeah, we had a bit of a nightmare session a few months ago. So, but we're back, and we are determined to get the word out of our award season 2024. And congratulations to Manchester City Council. Again, we're going to keep saying congratulations because we keep coming back. Congratulations to Manchester City Council, who won the best scheme for Chorlton Cycleway. It took a few years to build. I think it's a deserved winner. And we're going to hear today from Mandie of how it came about, where it sits in the sort of timeline of the journey of sort of active travel in this city, and, your challenges and how how it came about through what you do as a councillor. So yeah, it'd be good to hear, like, what was your involvement? Like, what did you do to sort of get this scheme going?
Oh, Theo, you're asking me to go back a long time now, aren't you? But so I was first elected in 2014, and Manchester Labour Group's got a tradition of having people who are lead members for various different topics. And the person who was the lead member for cycling, as it was originally before me, who was Councillor Carl Austinby, as he is now, he was standing down, so there was this opportunity. So I put my hand up and was duly elected to do it. And I've actually done it, although it's now changed. It's walking, cycling, more the whole thing, active travel now. So I took an interest right from the first time. That's just because I've been an everyday cyclist all my life. Don't know why. A lot of people haven't, but I just have. I just like it. I like being on my bike. I like being out. I like being able to park right outside the door of the shop where I'm going instead of having to park my car miles away like you do. So I just think so, and it makes me feel good. So I took an interest, and I learned at that point there were kind of early plans to have a cycleway in Chorlton. Mm-hmm. And there was funding for it, but they were at a really early design stage. The Wilmslow Road cycle lane, however, was being built at that time.
Right.
And you might remember it was quite tricky. They had a lot of difficulties really getting it accepted. It's not perfect design. That's not a secret to anybody, is it? So after that was done, the whole programme of rolling forward came under review. So the Chorlton scheme was paused. It was supposed to be for 6 months anyway. So rolling on a few years, that money was still there. But lots of things changed. We got the mayoral elections. Andy Burnham was elected, came in, he appointed Chris Boardman. They had this big idea of making the whole thing a far bigger thing, and got some money for it from the Mayor's Challenge Fund. So that meant that there was far more money available to do a much better scheme, because obviously what we all know is the danger for people on bikes is always at a junction. On the Wilmslow Road, those are very standard junctions where you pull up alongside the car or lorry or whatever it is, and hope they've seen you. Anybody who's ever used a bike knows this. So finally, the scheme was designed. It was always going to be a massive challenge. I think it is probably the longest similar scheme anywhere in the country, because there are the London schemes, but the superhighways, but they tend to be on real main roads without many side roads. This is through residential areas. So it was really problematic and difficult. And then there was a decision made to split it into 4 to make it sort of manageable project-wise. So we first did the bit alongside Chorlton Park, right in the south, so from Hardy Lane up to at the bus station, where it kind of petered out, and then started at Hume. So the idea was that everything would meet together. It took a long time. There was massive support from residents, I have to say, massive support from residents. But local businesses were really quite anxious, and I understand that, as to how it was going to affect them. And some of that anxiety and hostility hasn't all gone away. But I have to say, as I cycled the length of it this morning, I didn't encounter a single parked up vehicle. And we've just very recently got cameras on as well to cover some of the areas where there was a lot of residual parking. So that'll do, will it? For a nutshell, with air, it's happening. People are using it.
Yeah, it's great, and the work still actually continues, because the Deansgate stuff, that's connecting to Chorlton Cycleway through Deansgate Interchange, and that also goes up towards Trafford as well. And it almost feels now we're getting that. Chorlton Cycleway was the catalyst to what is now a bigger, wider network approach. And what you said there about the neighbourhood connections, we were just talking about them actually on the podcast just before you came in. What I really like about Chorlton Cycleway is that it considers those connections between places like schools, communities, leisure centres, that kind of thing, where maybe in the past on the superhighways, it was more about getting men maybe into town for their job or whatever. And now it's a bit more, we understand that most cycle journeys are actually really short, and they're more like in the neighbourhood. And I think because of the way the Cyclops junction works, it connects like the way that you can create a north, south and east, west connectivity. I think that really opens up the network to cross that severance of that road. I think the Cyclops junction is just like a really innovative design that really helps those inter-neighbourhood connections that maybe we wouldn't have considered before we designed like cycleways like the Chorlton Cycleway.
I think so. I think that does enable you. It does enable you to go from in lots of different directions. We all know there's still lots to do, and there's lots to do in terms of helping people to get to the bike routes along our residential roads. Those are problems that we're working on. It will take some time. But so, for example, yes, with the Chorlton one, it goes to Chorlton Park Primary. That is absolutely brilliant. It's just fantastic to see kids using it. When I see people on the bike lane, it just especially women and children. You're right. It's not about getting men to work and back. Yes, it is about getting men to work and back, but mostly for me, it's about enabling your granny. I'm a granny, or your grandkid. I've got some of them as well. Meaning those can ride safely on it. And for me, that's why getting the cameras on to make sure that it's clear. That's really, really important. Really important.
I was riding up the Chorlton Cycleway the other week and saw, a group of kids. I assume kids all from one family or a couple of neighbours, like just riding up the stretch quite near Hume. So, what was previously a very busy, hostile road, one of those types of roads where people would say, like, it's irresponsible to have your kids unsupervised there. And they were just out without parents enjoying being able to ride the bikes up and down. And I think that is exactly the change that we want to see across the city is, safe space on the roads so that it isn't irresponsible to let children make their own journeys to school.
No, I couldn't agree more. And last Friday morning, I went to the launch of the Chorlton Park Primary bike train. It was just absolutely fantastic to see that. They got 2 arms. One started, I think, at Maitland Avenue and came up down Hardy Lane and to Chorlton Park Primary. The other came down St Werburgh's Road. So they weren't actually using it. But the really good thing about it was that it was parents and kids. So that will really encourage those parents and kids to ride together, and to give the parents confidence as well. Because if you as a parent haven't ridden, then you're going to be freaking out, aren't you, to put your 4-year-old on a road. So, you need to feel that you know what you're doing as well. That is really important, important.
Yeah, that's interesting. What you said earlier about, it needs to be safe for a granny, and then you say, well, I'm a granny.
Yeah.
Like that in my mind is like reframing what the cycle lane's for. Because like when I hear the word granny, like I don't think of someone riding down the cycleway. And even though like I'm in active travel, and I think a lot of people out there would, if you said, oh, we're building Shilton Cycleway so grannies can cycle, they'd probably say, what on earth are you on about? Like, but like the reality is that people of all ages are going to use this infrastructure, and we need to reframe in this country as a society what being active means through all intergenerationally. Like I think it is, then the Chorlton Cycleway has enabled that really.
Well, that was it. That's exactly the point, isn't it? I don't know if you can cast your mind back to when the Mayor's Challenge Fund was first launched, and there was this big yellow booklet, and the idea from Chris Boardman was that it was everybody, I think, from 8 to 80. I'm not at the 80 point yet, but I'm a lot closer to that than I am to the 8. And that is really the point, because if we are going to get the country moving properly, actively, then it can't just be guys in their 20s, can it? And I also think that that's part of combating this horrible culture war that we've got, where sometimes because I'm out on a bike, it's as if people think you're making some sort of statement. I'm not. I'm just riding my bike and I want to live. It's quite simple, really, isn't it? It's got to be those people, otherwise we'll never get the numbers that we need. And it's just really important, isn't it, for everybody's health?
So, Mandie, you mentioned earlier businesses and the challenges around the opinions of some business owners about the cycleway. I wondered if you could expand on that and how that's sort of developed over time, over the project's construction.
Well, I mean, you've got to say the concerns are legitimate, aren't they? Because the retail world is a hard world anyway. People are facing multiple challenges. So it's really important. And, and the community really values those businesses as well as them providing people for a living. So that is really important. But I do think there was a piece of work done in London, wasn't there, that indicated that ultimately over time the spend per customer reduced, but the number of visits increased. That would be my experience as well, because I now do much more small shops and rarely do a big shop. I realise because I'm not out at work for 35 hours a week. That's easier for me than most, so I'm not trying to gloss over it. But cars, it's not the car that spends the money, it's the person that spends the money. Exactly. So the important point is to get people to your front door. And if you've got 8 bike racks just around the corner, then that's 8 people spending money, isn't it? Not one person. Yeah.
And one of the things we've heard anecdotally on things like the Wilmslow Road Cycleway is that some of the loudest objectors to cycle lanes from a business point of view are the owners of businesses who themselves park their car outside their business to work every day. And that car's not bringing in any cash to the business. It's not a customer. And if you imagine a classic high street anywhere in Manchester, if every shop had an owner who parked their car out the front of their shop, it would look like that street was completely full of cars and completely reliant on cars for business, when actually none of them are spending any money.
Well, I've heard that too. Whether or not it's absolutely factually true, I have absolutely no idea, but I have heard it. And of course it's right, but we're all creatures of habit, aren't we? And none of us is going to be persuaded to change our habits by somebody telling us off. Have you ever changed a habit for somebody telling you off? Well, so we've got to find better ways of talking to people about it.
Definitely. I think the way I would talk about it is not to talk about driving, but just to talk about the possibilities and what people can, like what you could do. Like, I think, for instance, when they did some resurfacing in Chorlton recently, and a few of the businesses were a bit annoyed with the works. And I went actually when it was being resurfaced, and you couldn't drive down there. But there was one of the businesses, I won't say who it is, but one of the businesses that was complaining about the works, there was actually quite a few bikes locked up to the railings outside their business. And I thought, well, I wish they could know, that a lot of their customers are actually cycling there, because maybe that would reframe their perspective on like who their customers are. So I think it's just about again talking about what you're saying earlier, just reframing like what it is to be a customer. Like, we're not just cyclists, we're not just people walking. We are participating in general society.
Yeah. Oh well, the getting the carriageway resurfaced as well as having the bike lane done. I won't bore you with the technical details of funding streams and timelines. And let's just say it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was. I really enjoyed cycling down there when there were no cars. Actually, I could weave across the road.
So, interesting what you say there about, like, I won't bore you with the funding stuff, but that stuff is kind of what dictates what happens on the ground. Yeah. And then people see what happens on the ground and they're a bit confused because they see things happening in what they would consider the wrong order or at the wrong time. But you as a council, you understand the way that, the government, all that kind of stuff, the financial stuff works and the funding and that. How do you as a council, how do you take that information that's quite technical and boring and convey it as something that people in your constituents would understand and sympathise with, maybe? Well,
probably, obviously not well enough, because there are people who get annoyed. Well, it is just as simple as, so for example, with Ballamore Road, that was resurfaced from a government fund because it's an A road. And that money had been in place for quite a long time. And actually the council came forward and said that they were planning to do it before the bike lane was done. So we as councillors said, no, don't do this. We only want you to close it twice. We only want you to close it once. That didn't quite work, but at least it was within fairly short order. But that bit of money only covered Ballamore Road. It didn't cover Manchester Road. And that was a whole different set of challenges. Yeah, because then they've got to find the money for that to be done.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues really is just the volume of traffic using the network, and you don't really get a quiet time anymore to sort of do these works. I mean, probably in like the 60s or something, you could just resurface a road and there's not many cars on the road. But now, like, we've seen the if you look at the data, the amount of journeys used by car, on A, B and C roads has gone up year on year, and we haven't hit peak car yet. And I think that is a problem because, and especially with the utilities as well, the utilities network is just such a confusing labyrinth, and a lot of the time they don't know where any of it is, and these issues are making it more of a headache to do roadworks and not just roadworks to build like cycling infrastructure.
No, you're absolutely right about all those things. And I did see a stat quite recently about the increased number of vehicles on Greater Manchester roads. I can't remember what it was, but it was absolutely phenomenal in the last decade, the number of increase. And this was private cars. I've seen another national stat about the number of vehicles overall, and such a large proportion of that is vans and delivery vans, and that change in culture is also, obviously, it's part of the problem why people in high streets are suffering, because if people think they can just send off for a pair of tights, and a van will turn up with a pair of tights later on that day, why would you get on your own bike or even in your own car and go down the road?
No, yeah, there's so culturally there's so much changing with the way we live, like, and transport has a tie into all of those things, and it is fascinating the way that our cities are having to adapt to the way that the technology and culture is shifting on such a big level, and it's, you know, all the online world is having such a massive impact on the built environment that we all live in. So yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and all these issues, you know, the high street. I think the high street is, for us as campaigners, that's probably the hardest. It's probably the part of campaigning now where we're looking at and thinking, like, you know, the A6, Longsight, Rusholme, Levenshulme. These are really places where if we want good active travel connectivity, we've got to really find a solution to the high street as a place, as a destination, but also as a travel journey. So yeah, it's fascinating to hear that.
Yeah, but we know it can be done because you've only got to go to other European countries. Like, I've got family in Holland and go to Holland a lot. And if you look at the way that their high streets are organised, there's a massive bike park. There's bike parking everywhere. Yeah. And that, you know, we haven't got that. It's not been part of our culture. We've moved in a different direction for 50 years. And so we've probably got, let's hope it doesn't, we don't have to kind of roll it back year by year because it'll take a long time to get there. But it is part of so many other bigger agendas. It's part of the health agenda. Public transport. I mean, I do think that if we can do more on our public transport and with buses, there's so much there that is scalable quite quickly that hopefully that will help to reduce the volume of traffic, but will also increase the number of people that are just walking down their own road and so start to care about what the pavement is like. That's also part of the solution for people on bikes going down those same roads, isn't it?
Yeah. Traffic volume and the B network, so interlinked, and you're right about the buses and the trains and everything. It's all, and the trams. It's all connected, and I think that's why we're all on the same hymn sheet here with the B network, and that's why as a campaign group, Walk Ride Gem, we've really bought into the B network because we understand that vehicle is so important for active travel to jump onto and hitch a ride. Completely agree.
Although I think we sometimes, because it's politically easier, people fall into this trap of thinking we can do all carrot and no stick, that if we make a brilliant bus and tram system, then people will just magically stop using their cars. And I think the delivery vans example that you raised was very relevant, Mandie. If everyone's ordering online, delivery companies will deliver goods to people's houses by the most time-efficient way that they can. At the moment, that's vans. And if we get more people off the roads onto buses, it will make the roads even more attractive for vans. Mm. So there is a benefit to all the things you said, sort of, you know, quality of space, public health, environment, air pollution, by, you know, ultimately restricting where we allow traffic to dominate, and it can't just be sort of the 1980s view that we used to have where you predict and provide, you know, traffic's going to grow, so we keep giving more space over to cars because look where it's gotten us: congestion and chaos. I'm inverted commas as I say that, but you know, people will say as soon as you close a road it's chaos, and that's because we're starting to fill them closer to capacity.
I think that's probably right, but am I not right in thinking that the British cycling team succeeded the way they did under David Brailsford, because it was like every little change was getting one close to that 100%, and so we would just be making a mistake if we think there's a simple answer to this. It's not. It's all those things. So, for example, I think that there are moves to try and encourage people to have delivery boxes rather than have delivered to their own home. And I would hope that those companies would be working more towards incentivising people to do that, rather, you know, and disincentivising people to have stuff delivered to their homes. Not sure those jobs are great anyway for people, you know. Mm. So I think, you know, they're probably very hard jobs and people are under a lot of pressure and don't earn a great deal of money unless they race around and deliver loads of packages.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the sort of the scope for the change gets bigger and bigger, isn't it, every time you look at it?
So we spoke about the Chorlton Cycleway opening up connections to other parts of the network because it's so nice and so well designed, and the junctions are really open. And I think that takes you on to sort of cross-border connections. You know, the Chorlton Cycleway runs within Manchester City Borough from Chorlton to the centre, but actually your neighbours with Trafford and maybe Stockport's a bit further away, but the Chorlton Cycleway has opened up new connections into Trafford Borough.
Ah, well, it's not quite as simple as that. There is quite a bit of this Chorlton Cycleway is actually in Trafford. And as I was cycling up this morning, I was thinking, oh, they need to get their litter pigs out here. So it goes into Trafford as you go past, is it called Seymour Cross?
Where those MOT garages are.
Yes, yeah, just opposite the Hillary Steph, and that I think there might be a post office there, and so that parade there is that's all in Trafford, and I think it's in Trafford, the Globe Estate, where that's quite a tricky area sometimes for people parking. That's also in Trafford, so that's happening. But if you think about it, King's Road in Trafford takes you quite a long way out, and there's a lot of people live out sort of that way, more Stretford way. That's a really good route in for them, so that's something else to be looking at, isn't it? There's Talbot Road too, which is a nice road to use. We definitely need to look more and harder at inter-district routes, I think. I was driving down Moldith Road West yesterday and thinking, this would be such a fantastic bike route. I must have another go at that.
That's one of the ones. Harry and I were talking about this on a previous episode of the podcast. We were cycling through Newton Heath on a road which was horrible. It was probably the worst bike ride either of us had ever been on in terms of just like traffic and hostility, and it was really nasty. But actually, Moldith Road West I would put in that same category of a road which generates conflict because it's actually a residential road of a small scale, suited to low speed, suited to, friendly neighbourhood walking and cycling. And it's a traffic sewer because our main roads, our A roads, are, clog up from too much traffic. And so people the pressure is eased by people shooting down what should be nice, pleasant streets at 30 plus miles an hour.
I don't know. I do know that the police once caught somebody on Moldith Road West doing 90.
Oh my God.
I'm glad they were caught. But speeding's a real problem on that road, isn't it? And it's got a school on it. So when that school was built, Chorlton High South School, we did try really hard to get them to switch one of the lanes out of it, but out of using the money that was available through the bill, but there just was nowhere near enough money, so we had to settle for much less than we really wanted to. But I do think that it would be a great road to use. We've had some successes on it because we've now got the 20 mile an hour limit on it from Hardy Lane up to where the tram crosses. So that was a win. Like I say, you've got to take all your small wins, haven't you? I'll make a note and go home and start again.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, we were just talking about the Wythenshawe network map that the council have built and the way that they're prioritising schemes and looking at the network as in a holistic way, but also on a granular level. And I think that approach across the whole of Manchester will really open up like the next set of schemes and networks to come along, but also connections, like you said, to Trafford as well. And I know Aidan, the exec for climate at Trafford Council, Aidan Williams, he was saying how the Chorlton Cycleway was quite instrumental into the way they perceive their network in Trafford and how they can make new connections. So yeah, I think we're getting to that point now where it's really important that councils are communicating across the borders more, because we have seen in the past where bike lanes across from like Salford into Manchester kind of end at the border, or for whatever reason, and these things really need ironing out if we want to increase that modal share, because a severed bike lane is probably it's almost not a waste. It's not a waste of time because it's there for the future, but it's just the potential completely gets suppressed of what it could be.
Well, people who live here don't think I'm in Manchester now, I'm in Trafford now, do they? They don't care. They think, this is where I shop, this is where my doctor's is, and this is where I go, my kids go to school, and those are the routes you need. So we need to start thinking much more about making it easy for people to do those short journeys and get their bike locked up safely when they've done it.
Yes, definitely. Anyway, thanks so much, Mandie, for coming along, and congrats for the award.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
This podcast is supported by Leigh. Did you know Leigh has been helping injured cyclists for over 30 years?
Oh, no, we didn't talk about that when they came on.
Yeah, they're actually the exclusive legal provider for British cycling members, but they do more than just handle claims. They're working on making cycling more accessible too.
Oh, yeah, like what kind of thing?
Well, they're co-sponsoring a report with the all-party parliamentary group for cycling and walking. It's looking at the barriers that stop people from taking up cycling.
Oh, that's really important. I mean, there's loads of things that put people off, like cost, safety, poor infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And Leigh is a claimant-only firm, so they only represent individuals, never big corporations or insurers.
That's good.
Yeah, they don't just focus on legal stuff. They support community projects like Simply Cycling in Manchester too.
Oh, it's great to see businesses giving back, especially in ways that actually help people.
Yeah. Thanks to Leigh for sponsoring this podcast. So, I'm here with Layla. And I've come to your beautiful house. It's actually a privilege to be here in this very mindful space that we're in, recording this podcast. All the beautiful greenery outside your window. And I've come because you're the final guest that we need to speak to on our award kind of edition of our podcast, where we've been talking across all the award winners for the Walk Ride Gym Awards last December. And we're in nearly the middle of summer, so 6 months away down the road, and we're just getting that final interview in. And the reason you won the award, congratulations, is because Kidical Mass was a massive thing, and it really energized and brought a lot of people out onto the streets, kids, families, to see how important it is that people have a safe space to cycle. And I just want to. Let's have an introduction of who you are and where that came from and where the idea for Kidical Mass came from, and so go for it.
Hiya, my name's Layla Seibert. Live in Chorlton in Manchester with my husband and 2 kids. We never used to be a family of cyclists, but from my kids being younger, so they're now 9 and 12, but we evolved into people who moved about generally by car and quite quickly to moving about by bike. That came about really because it was child-led, and the kids discovered being on a bike from a really early age and loved it, and then kind of peer pressured, parent pressured, kid pressured us, me in particular, to get on our bikes more.
Where did that come from? From school?
Really interestingly, I think it actually probably came from the dad thinking about it. It's not something I've really, really thought about until just now. My husband, we lived in London years back before we had the kids, and that was where my, not even love, because I didn't really cycle, but my real recognition of how agile cycling was my husband used to cycle to and from work. I used public transport, he cycled, and the whole time we lived in London, I looked on at it with a lot of admiration for the people that did it, but was always too scared to do it. And just in London, weekly, there'd be someone killed on a bike, and those white bikes were everywhere, all over those ghost bikes. Yeah. So that really put the fear of got into me. Used to mountain bike quite a lot, but it was very much like a hobby, like a mountain bike, and felt confident and loved being on my bike. And whenever we'd go out to wherever we'd go on trails, I would love that and feel like the most free I'd ever felt. So then, I suppose, fast forward to moving to Manchester. My first son was born in London, and we moved back here. Vincent carried on cycling, commuter cyclist, always had been. And me just continually to look on it and go, God, that's something I really love to do, but I just don't feel like I can. Our son, who's now 12, took to a balance bike. I think he was 1, he was on a balance bike and he loved it, and he just always wanted to be out on it. And Vince was like, yes, winning, like my child's a cyclist. And me still looking on going, oh, how do I do this? And then our second child was born, and by this time Noah was riding a bike. the kids, you know, our eldest would, if I ever suggested getting in the car when he could even, you know, only just talk, he'd be like, no, mummy, on my bike. And I'd be like, oh God, I'm going to have to get myself a bike for the road.
Yeah, that's interesting that the kids like it, because I've heard people before say, oh, like, I'm like, obsessed with bikes, and then when I got my kids like on a cargo bike or cycling, eventually they were like, oh, this isn't very cool, I want to drive. So it's interesting.
That isn't what happened with our kids. But then I think his dad rode a bike, you know, and I guess he's just saw that as, because I used to see it as the easiest thing. I'd be like, God, he can just jump on his bike and go anywhere whenever he wants, and I just don't feel confident in doing that. So I bought my trusty Gazelle, which I've still got now, big heavy tank of a bike, that isn't electric and is a proper effort to ride. I bought that back when, so our eldest was still small, like even preschool, and that was a turning point for me, because I got on it and I rode about with the kids and was like, wow, this just feels great and free. And that freedom that I got from like when I went out on my mountain bike, I was like, I can get it every day from just moving about in it. And that was it. So that was how my love of being on a bike with the kids came about. It really was inspired by the kids. That kind of corresponded with Noah starting at the local school and having lived in London. So when we lived in London, when was that, going back? 2009, we moved there. There were a few school streets. I didn't know what they were at the time, but I remember around Old Street Way being like, what is this? And asking people and them to mention school streets, and you know, like, and at that point didn't have kids. We're like, well, this is amazing. Like, this just feels amazing. So, and that was it, kind of a few passing experiences of that. When we were in Manchester and our first was like getting to the point of going to school, and I was like, what? Dropping him off at school, looking at all the cars, going, I'm sure I remember something about school streets and stuff. And then our streets, Chorlton, which was like I think it's like a lottery funded, like a piece of work that happened.
Yeah, it was a coalition actually. Walk Ride GM helped facilitate with Groundworks, Austrians, other people
and so
involved,
like amazing Pauline, and oh my goodness, I can't believe I've forgotten. Anyway, Pauline was working for Walk Ride GM as part of our streets, Chorlton. Big interest in school streets and streetscape and like healthy streets. Really enthused me into kind of, you know, put my ear to the ground again around thinking about school streets, and so went to a few of the meetings. And from a Brookburn primary school perspective, the rest was history really, because I was very much like, we need school street at my kids' school. And so then, now, and there have been a lot of people involved since, like a lot of volunteers, a lot of parents, and it's been amazing. And that school now, Brookburn, now has a permanent school street, and that's that. So that's where kind of my real interest around kids on bikes, families on bikes, school streets came from. Just to, I suppose, to add into this, because I do think it's a really kind of influential part of it. I'm a pharmacist, but my background is working within respiratory health, and I do a lot of work with children with asthma. So air quality, toxic air, that, you know, really understanding the effects of dirty air on child's health is something that I have taken time to understand and really start to incorporate in my conversations as a professional as well. So that's really fed into it. So, you know, the physical activity and just the joy of being on a bike as a mum with my kids, but also understanding how that plays into child health, human health, and like the air that we all breathe, and also physical activity levels. For me, it's kind of like led me naturally to Kidical Mass, and I can talk a bit more about that if you want me to.
Yeah, I'll just quickly like say there that a few things on what you've said. Like, the public health angle has been a real big open door for us as a campaign group, because it's actually brought more professionals into the fold in terms of like widening the tent, so that we can have more like a bigger coalition when we ask for things like better infrastructure and stuff, because like the school street stuff, that a lot of that has come through public health rather than highways.
Well, and so that leads me to school streets took me to, so involved in school streets as a parent, really with some knowledge from my healthcare work, but it was a parent that I'd met through Our Streets Chorlton and School Streets work, who lives in Chorlton, that tagged me into a call out on Twitter at the time to say, Layla, this looks like right up your street. And what it was Trafford Council public health team and NHS England were advertising for a population health fellow to work at Trafford Council 2 days a week to do some work around school streets and and behaviour change and the challenges and opportunities around that within Trafford. And I look back and think, wow, it was timely, and it was almost meant to be, because it really did. It kind of triangulated all my interests and also my professional capacity. So I did that population health fellowship, which was NHS England funded. It was a multi-professional fellowship where I had a lot of teaching and gained a lot of insight into population health modelling and how we deliver population health, that kind of population level. But I focused the work that I did in the small research piece of research that I did at Trafford Council on school streets, and what ended up being actually me looking at the barriers to implementation of school streets. And I did a lot of work interviewing head teachers about their understanding of school streets, and also, getting their views on what they think about cars outside their school, air quality, which I know has been really valuable information that was taken back at lots of different levels at the council, within public health and wider, that led to them now having a permanent school streets officer. And I think they might be, they're one of few that now have that across Greater Manchester.
Hannah,
that is now Hannah doing that job, which is amazing. So absolutely, I think key to all of this, from a policy perspective, is that this is a population health matter. This, toxic air is a health inequalities matter fundamentally. And where we ignore it or where we don't recognise that it's a real issue, then, we are contributing towards driving wider health inequalities.
Yeah. Amazing. That's very comprehensive backdrop there. Lots of stuff I even learned there, so that's really nice to hear from you. And like the public health angle, again, is just so important, and that's where we're really finding, a good pickup in our campaigning. So so you've given a bit of a backdrop there of like how you got into school streets. Interestingly, you saw them in London, and I always think that people who live somewhere else are always good people to drive change, because it's sometimes hard to envisage something new if you've never experienced it. So
felt it, actually.
Felt it,
So I think, and that's been always I think that's the success of. I think the reason why a lot of school street trials lead to permanent school streets, because once it is felt by everybody who gets to experience it, I just don't think that you can unknow that feeling, like that peace, that freedom, that the smell of cleaner air, children smiling in the road, reclaiming their space. That once you've felt that as a human being, I think there's a realisation for everyone that this is what we all need. So I think you're right. Feeling something elsewhere that you can then apply to your own environment quite easily is definitely key.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's so good. So let's move on to like how. So you've got all this background and you're learning all this stuff and you're working, and you professionally. What was the trigger to start Kidical Mass, and who was involved? What people did you work with to set that up?
Yeah.
Talk me through the leading up to the first Kidical Mass, which was a couple of years ago now.
So I'm going to go back to when I first even heard the term Kidical Mass mentioned. I'd met Harry. I'd think Harry Larrington Spencer, who I don't know whether she still does, works for like Westminster Council,
Yeah,
their active travel team. Followed her avidly on Twitter and through social media, just like the work she's done in terms of active travel and promoting that. I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I think at the time, so years back, I think School Streets was just about getting going, even in terms of like us trialling it at Brookburn. And I saw advertised a webinar that Harry was leading through Salford University, and part of it was showing a film called Motherload, which is a film that is kind of directed and produced by a woman who's called Liz, and I forget her surname, so I apologise, but an amazing film that Liz Canning, that's her name, made about being a mother and the kind of the load of that, and how a massive weight was loaded, and how she was given freedom as a mum when she got a cargo bike. At this time, we didn't have a cargo bike. We do now. But Anna, I've not mentioned that before. We are a proud cargo bike family, which has changed in its use, actually, so, as the kids have got older, but still definitely has its mega uses. And so, yeah, at that time, that film was phenomenal. But in that film, she talked about Kidical Masses in the States, and there was, they were filmed as part of her film. I was like, wow, like that's awesome. Like, look at all these kids like dinging their bells, just like driving through the streets, like not having to worry. So I Googled Kidical Mass UK, and then Kidical Mass UK as an organisation came up, and I was like, oh, what's this? Have we ever had one in Manchester? Because there wasn't an official Kidical Mass Manchester at that point. But when I Googled Kidical Mass Manchester, Anna, what's Anna's surname? Anna from Station South.
You can just call her Anna from Station South.
Anna from Station South.
She's saved on my phone
that
as
wonderful woman.
Anna Powwow.
That's mine. I wanted to call her Anna Powwow. Why are you? Anyway, she's Anna Powwow now. Anna Powwow came up that Anna had done quite a few rides. They've mainly been like on the Fallowfield Loop and kind of off the roads, but she'd done some Kidical Mass-esque rides with Eve Holt, and so I got in contact with Anna, and I met with Anna and Lorenza at Station South one day, just to say what intel can you give me? How can we do this? I really feel the need. Like we need this in Manchester. And at the time they both had a lot on themselves, so couldn't necessarily commit a lot of time to getting a Kidical Mass up and running in Manchester. And as I was walking away from meeting with them too in Station South, I bumped into Pauline again, and I'd kept in touch with Pauline. Who was one of the founders of Station South, and who I'd met through Our Streets Chilton again, and just was like, we need a Kidical Mass in Manchester, and I'm really, I really want to make it happen. And Pauline said, let's make it happen then, because that's the kind of human that Pauline is.
Yeah, definitely. Like
one of the best kinds of human, and was like, well, let's do it. Like we can make it happen. So then, after that, Pauline really did give me the confidence to know that we definitely could do it. And then there were so many, like School Streets at that time, School Streets at Brookburn. There were lots of the volunteers from there, the parents. When I spoke to them about it, they were like, yeah, we could get involved in some way. And lots of them joined a lot of the early meetings to kind of shape how we might do it and what it might look like and where the route might be. And it was very much citizen-led in terms of like, how can we make this happen, and how can we make it accessible so that families can come. The other definitely massively influential people in making Kidical Mass happen were Sarah. I'm terrible with surnames. Sarah Rowe, yep. Who was working for Clean Cities, who were partnering Kidical Mass, I think globally, especially in Europe. Yeah, came on board and was phenomenal, just in really helping us set it up in a, I suppose not a professional way, but gave us some intel on kind of making it happen and what was happening in London at the time. They'd had quite a few Kidical Masses happen, so really linked us up with some of the European organisers and some of the other UK organisers, and that had successful Kidical Masses. Yeah. And Yeah, and that was it. And after that, we kind of very quickly were like, right, we need to do this with no resource. Actually, I say no resource, powered by people, powered by so much energy when it was mentioned on the school street, or to other parents that didn't count themselves as cyclists, but who were like, wow, that'd be amazing if we could all ride out in Manchester together, like without feeling scared, and bring the kids along. Definitely on board. Like, what can we do to help? And actually, I think it is also really, really important to mention at this point, and it's crazy that I've not mentioned her until now, but actually Eve Holt, who was our local counsellor at the time, just from the early days, even going back to school streets, I got in contact with her a few times when we were really stumbling at Brookburn to get things going with school streets, and she's just always there on hand, would jump on a call, give practical advice, really just embraced any ideas or anything that I ever wanted to chat to her about, or anyone else, any of the other parents to chat to her about from the school. Eve also, she's always been that kind of reassuring presence in terms of, again, when I went to her, she came. So I actually ended up, I'd forgotten about this, after Motherload happened and I got wind of Kidical Mass, and even before Kidical Mass set up, I put on a screening of, I got in touch with Liz Canning and said, can I pay to screen Motherload at somewhere in Chorlton? And Eve was really helpful there because, she's got contacts and does some work with the Edge Theatre in Chorlton. This is all coming back to me now. I'd forgotten about all of this.
It's really good.
And she helped me there, and we set up a film night, and it I think over 80 people came to that, and we put on a screening of Motherload. And afterwards, we went to the pub. Quite a few of us afterwards. Eve came along, and I was like, mention Kidical Mass to her then, and she was like, let's do it. You can, and also put me in contact with a few other people that I might want to chat to. So. Eve really has been just instrumental, I think, for so many of us in Greater Manchester. It's just given us the confidence to give things a go with joy at the heart. So whenever I think of Eve, I think of the word joy because she uses it a lot. But I always knew that if I mentioned something to Eve and she was like, "Yeah, do it," I was like, "Right, this is going to bring joy." Eve knows. So. Yeah, I think there's so many other people that have been involved, you included.
Oh yeah, I was just waiting for my name to come up now.
Harry Gray, I remember your surname.
And what I did notice is that all these people are women as well, which I find, considering what we were doing 10 years ago. I mean, I wasn't involved, but we as advocates of what we're trying to achieve, it was very male centric. And I was just quite excited that there was just something organically happening that was just run by a load of women who just wanted to see change.
Women, just are, by the nature of being women, are generally the main caregivers and the ones that have the load. And I suppose, I've mentioned early on that I've come at this mainly as a mother. And so, I suppose I've never thought about it like that, but it seems right that my inspiration and where to take the voice from on this, it has been parents in general, and there have been men involved, definitely. But, that mother voice, that voice from the caregiver that really has taken the load, and how biking can really be getting on your bike can really help that and make it more flexible and easier, has been really important.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't consider that, how it makes it easier.
Massively
to bear
easier.
That load,
so our cargo bike, our lovely Tern, who has, without a doubt, made my parenting journey so much easier, so much more flexible, so much faster getting places. And I think about my daughter used to go dancing on a Wednesday evening in Didsbury, which is, for anyone who doesn't live in South Manchester, it really isn't that far. There's just kind of one main road that connects Chorlton and Didsbury. And I always had, our Wednesday evenings were always really cutting it fine because I'd have to get home from work and then get her to dancing, which she loved so much and hated to miss. There was just no way that we were doing that in a car. I tried it. After if it was raining or whatever, and I think, come on, but Ruby, get in the car, and we would get in the car, and then we'd always be late. So, but on the turn, we were never late because we even if we went on the road in the little not so cycle path next to the road, we'd get there in half the time. So it did definitely make my life easier.
And each time how long it's going to take on a bike. Whereas in a car,
each time.
Traffic, you just don't know.
And I had happy kids, so, I can only speak for my kids, but my life's always easier when my kids are happy, and my kids always asked to go on the back of that turn.
Sounds like you've got great kids, I have to say.
I think all kids are great.
No,
all kids, if they're shown...
There's no hierarchy.
No, but if I... a lot of kids just don't get to experience it, and, we were lucky we could afford a turn. That was always a really interesting conversation as well that I would have with people. Go, how do you afford that?
But how do you afford a car?
Yeah, we afford it by not having a car.
Exactly. Petrol, MOT, tax, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's great. I really enjoyed that, hearing about the turn and the switching from the car. So we'll bring it back to Kidical Mass. So you got all this coalition of people, and you got the confidence from these people too that you could do this. And you sort of went in there to sort of do it. And I kind of got involved, I think, in the first one when you already had this coalition of people and you were looking for more marshals to help run the event. At that time, did you know how big it was going to be?
No, I never foresaw how big it was going to be. So for the first Kidical Mass, which, do you know what one was it? Was it in 2023, I think?
Yeah,
May
I think
2023.
So, yeah.
And we were gifted a beautiful sunny day. There were at least, it's hard that we didn't ever do an official head count, but at least 500 people. Were you there on the first one?
Yeah, I did. I've been to all three. Yeah.
And I was overwhelmed by it, but it felt like a festival, didn't it? And the colour, the balloons and the streamers and the smiles. So no, I had we had in mind if 50 people turned up, that would be immense.
Success, yeah.
And there were definitely more than 10 times the amount of people there. And what I just found it as there were some kids that turned up on roller skates and scooters, and there were 2 kids on balance bikes who did the whole of the Kidical Mass. They were just they were the superstars of the Kidical Mass.
And there was the back end marshal, had to be behind the last rider. Yeah. And it was obviously they're on the balance bike and they were just a bit off the back, weren't they? And they were missing the traffic lights.
That was my husband with the turn at the back, and he ended up riding those 2 kids in with both balance bikes on the turn, champions coming in at the end. Did most of the Kidical Mass on their balance bikes. So no, it was phenomenal, but we were buoyed. But I think everyone who was involved was buoyed by it, and then the gorgeous picnic at the end in the park was just gorgeous, and the ice cream van and the coffee cranks coffee cart.
Even that showed what's possible, these little businesses in the park, rather than it being a horrible car centric experience, it was just a nice beautiful mindful park with all these businesses selling you nice treats. It just had such a nice wholesome, all the bikes there, and everyone just sat having a picnic. It had such a nice feel to it. That to me was as exciting as the cycling. It was just a big event,
and it brought families together. So that for me, I know we've got the schools and community definitely comes out of the schools, but we don't get a lot of time at the school gate. Just not necessarily, the parents as well. There's a lot of conversations that were enabled just around how scary it is to cycle with your kids if you're not on a big Kidical Mass and you're doing it on your own. And we could all kind of support each other and attest to the fact that we're all all on different parts of that journey of feeling safe or not to cycle on the roads with our kids. But just getting to know and realise that there's so many of us out there who feel the same and want to do more of this, that was where the beauty was for me.
I agree, because sometimes before I started doing this, it felt like you see only a couple, or maybe only, this is now you see loads of people cycling, but back a few years ago, maybe you didn't see that many people cycling, and it felt like you were the only person like braving the roads and before the cycle lanes were there.
And being
like,
screamed at, not
Yeah,
not often.
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't like to overplay
Yeah,
kind of abuse,
same.
because it is, it has been overwhelmingly like a properly joyous thing, cycling with my kids on the road.
Yeah.
Like but it only takes one or two things or people saying things to you for you to really stop and question, like, oh God, am I doing the wrong thing? And we do all care about what other people
Of course.
think.
Of course we do.
And take other people's opinions
Like
on board.
how many times have you cycled somewhere and you're at like an event or something and someone's gone, oh, you cycle? And then they like look at you like you're weird, and then like you feel like you're the odd quirky one rather than just doing something that's completely normal.
And feels great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they go, "Oh, you cycle in the rain?" And they look at you like you're a freak or something. And I'm like, "No, I'm just riding my bike."
I've learned to embrace that though. Like,
Yeah.
I just think, well, actually, I really hope that you get to experience how it feels to be a freak on a bike one day, because it
know.
feels so good.
Yeah, and like
And it's the biggest gift I definitely that we've given to our kids, I think. There's lots of other things, but in terms of independence and freedom and mobility, like, I couldn't wish for anything more for them, living in a city and
Definitely.
having the confidence to do that.
And what you were saying there, like taking it to Kidical Mass again, is like bringing everyone together at Kidical
Yeah.
Mass. 500, 600 people. You feel like you're part of something bigger than the individual there, and then that collective sort of feeling you take forward. And I took it forward. I felt like there's something going on here that I didn't feel before.
Yeah, the groundswell was what really felt, wasn't it? Like it really demonstrated, and at the time, my motivation for Kidical Mass wasn't as a demonstration. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't even to to show the council anything. It was because I'd seen that film and gone, wow, that looks
Yeah.
amazing. But then after reflecting after the first Kidical Mass happened, I was like, actually, like policymakers and the powers that be that do hold the purse strings and do hold the ability to make decisions around mobility in our city for families needed to see that.
Yeah, and I think I remember speaking to you after the first one and just reflecting on it, and from my perspective, I saw it straight away as that, and I was like, this is great because decision makers will see this, and we finally got a community that is demanding better things, better infrastructure. But you were kind of like you were just so like engrossed in just the fun of it, and I enjoyed that because like that's what we need. Like I see Walk Ride Gem's role as like facilitating, and not just me, like, oh, this is what we all think at Walk Ride Gem, is facilitating these groups who are doing great, wonderful things, but maybe aren't also seeing how impactful they are to politicians and decision makers. So that's why I was the light bulb went for me. It was like, oh, we can just like promote this and elevate this and make it. We don't need, as a campaign group, we don't have to be everything. We just have to tell the stories of other people.
Yeah.
So like that's where we get
and highlight those stories to the places where they are going to be heard most effectively.
Yeah,
I think that's
definitely.
it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think one thing also was, so all those families, those kids with a voice, feeling like they had a voice, feeling like they could come out and own their city and explore their city and really truly claim that for themselves. When we all joined up in the park afterwards, after making a lot of noise, dinging bells, all the conversation that happened and people were there for hours, I had a realization. It was like, this is our city. These are the people that live in our city. These are the main, in terms of numbers, working families, or families in general, make up the most of who live in the city.
Yeah.
And yet I don't feel, and even from working at the council during my fellowship, I didn't feel up until that point that those kids, those families really had a voice in active travel circles. So there's a lot of policy made and decisions are made about active travel infrastructure one thing that kind of really is evidence that, you know, a lot of infrastructure is set up to get people from the suburbs into the city centre. But where's the thinking about families and children, adults with children, and how they move about and where they need to go and what that needs in terms of mobility?
It's great you say
and
that.
That was what that's what then led me to think, actually we need to do a second Kidical Mass, because that needs demonstrating on repeat.
I have to say, I think the Overton window, or whatever you want to call it, like the thinking on this has actually moved significantly. Previously, it was very get people to work into town, and they're the quote important journeys. I've seen a shift recently where the methodology on finding out how people travel indicates that there's way more community journeys happening between like school and shops and just going out to see friends or whatever. And there's no illegitimate journey.
No.
Is another thing. So just because you're going out on your bike to you know, poodle around and go to the park and coming home, that is a legitimate journey.
It's probably more important
Yeah,
than
exactly.
in terms of well-being.
But previously, we'd only picked up the journeys that add GDP.
That feed the economy, maybe, yeah.
But this mindset has changed. I've seen it because Manchester are doing an active travel network plan, and the methodology for that includes schools, includes community journeys. It's very much focused around that, and that's where the quiet ways and the crossings and that kind of thing come in. It's less about getting people into the city centre, which is up. You know, they're also important though, to get people to the city centre is also important.
But absolutely, and what's interesting about Kidical Mass was one of the main feedback that we got from families who felt they couldn't come was it was way too far to ride into the city centre, which is where we've had all 3 Kidical Masses in the centre of Manchester, because we thought actually that's where people can get to easier.
Yeah.
But in terms of cycling into town with kids and then doing a Kidical Mass and back out again, that's a massive journey.
But you did those feeder rides.
So we did feeder rides, which were phenomenal. And that would definitely be something that we would want to work on, I think, if we did any future Kidical Masses, because I think, you know, we hit probably a ceiling in terms of numbers. Not that the numbers that attend is the most important thing. I think it's just about having a mass, you know, of people that are safe to ride. But the bikes on trams wasn't a thing. So I know that there's been across Greater Manchester, there's been a trial of bikes on trams, but that was and on trains. So, you know, I had quite a few people that I know who live just way too far out of Manchester city centre to cycle in with their kids, who are like, you know what, we'd come if we could get on a tram or a train, but we can't. That was a big limitation. So that's interesting as well, isn't it? How different modes of public transport interact with cycling, exactly. And how it's not just about active travel.
No, it's integrated travel.
It's enabling bikes to be part of all of the different modes of travel.
Yeah, multimodal. But since the last Kidical Mass, they've finished the Deansgate lane. So that's like the first real connection into the suburbs for the city centre. So that's good to have. And I've noticed actually more people I've seen more like kids and families using that route into the city centre, which is really nice.
Lovely.
So yeah, we'll just take it back a little bit. So there's been 3 Kidical Masses now.
To have.
And the last one was just, I would say, crazy. There was, I think, it gets bigger every time, and there was 600 people, and I think as marshals we kind of hit that point where we were like, whoa, this is probably the limit of how many people we can manage in a city centre.
And it was, for me, as kind of founder, if you want to call founder of Kidical Mass, and initiator and activator, but also with a responsibility. I'm a registered healthcare professional, and you know, this is absolutely about child health and fun and joy, and people feeling that it felt very big, and was just as they all have been a joyful, fun ride out. But yeah, I think we had the most marshals that we'd had on any ride on that 3rd ride. But I don't know what it felt a bit more heated in terms of interactions that some of the marshals had with some angry drivers who felt like they'd been held back for too long while the ride passed. And that was a bit of a moment for me where I thought, oh, that, you know, this, where are we going with this? And in terms of just safety and no adult or child kind of feeling hurt or kind of offended in any way by anything that happened on the ride. So, you know, it was gorgeous, and you know, we ended again with a really lovely picnic in the park. But yeah, the third ride was a moment to just take stock, and it's been over a year now since we had that, as to where we, and I mean that as a wider we, the city, everyone who's been involved, families, you know, what we do with that and what we can learn, and and what opportunities that gives for the city.
I agree. And just to sort of tie into my thoughts on it, so we when we go meet Bev Craig, the leader of the council, one thing she always says is, we've got enough campaign, we've got enough people from Chorlton now, we get it. There's enough momentum and backing. And
it's a shame I live in Chorlton, is it? I could do with living in Prestwich or somewhere.
There's enough consensus, basically, just what she's saying. Like Mandie, obviously the councillor, she's giving it big. Like, there's enough consensus, and she gets it. But what she wants consensus from other parts of the city.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we kind of thought, okay, let's, as a campaign group, let's not focus on Chorlton. We want to keep it there. Obviously,
I think it's really,
we've got to have momentum. We can't let the ball. Can't drop the ball.
It's really key. And before we did the first Kidical Mass and we were looking at the route, you know, quite a lot of, just by the nature of volunteers who are involved, live in South Manchester, wanted it to be a South Manchester ride. And I was like, absolutely not. No, this is not about Chorlton. You know, the heart of active travelling.
But there has to be a start, you know.
There does, and that's immense, and it's great. But you know, that was the reason that we did it in the centre of Manchester. But even after we did the first ride, you know, and coming at this again from a health inequalities, population health perspective, I want to see, as a mum and a human and a healthcare professional, every child and every family able to benefit and feel the joy and love and fun from cycling.
Yeah.
And that needs involvement and activation in parts of the city that really haven't had that at all yet.
Yeah.
And we tried to link in with some, you know, adult cycle groups and contacts that we had in other parts of the city to try and get the word out there about Kidical Mass, the second and the third Kidical Masses, to hopefully have families from other parts of the city come along, and it just didn't quite happen.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely what I would love to see, and after a big hiatus of us, you know, of Sarah and Pauline and Paul, who's one of the other key organisers, and myself, taking a bit of a step back. We are meeting next week to talk about what we do next, and I don't think it is going to be a big Manchester Kidical Mass, but I think what I'm really keen to do is to share the learning with some more local groups, and for smaller, more local Kidical Masses to maybe happen with, you know, the learning and the intel and hopefully, you know, some input and going along and helping with the rides, enabling that to happen so that it can spread a bit more across the city. Naz, who was one of the other winners on your Walk Ride GM Awards night, and she's done phenomenal work up in the north of Manchester. And I think now has got like a little bike club,
the bike
out
club
of
at
Heaton Park.
Yeah.
Naz is really keen to maybe do like a Kidical Mass up in North Manchester, which I would love to see.
Start in Heaton Park and then take to the streets.
Absolutely. So we are going to meet with Naz and chat with her and hopefully support her in enabling that in her community. And I think that is now what it's about.
I think it is. I think I don't want to say it like we've won, but like it does feel like, in a sense, we've won. Like the job's not done. There's still parts of South Manchester that are really dangerous, like to cycle, and we shouldn't forget that. But you know, there's other parts of north of the city that really need a lot of political intervention in terms of like changing the street. So and the community needs to have that buy-in to make that happen.
Come in.
Yeah, come in.
Star of the show. Our Noah, our first child that I was talking about earlier, has just arrived home from school. Were you on your bike? Yeah.
On his bike.
Just come home from school on his bike.
Brilliant.
There we go.
We were with some kids yesterday who were in an Active Travel England video, and they were on the stage at Active City York. I was just telling you earlier, wasn't I? And they were
Say hi, Noah.
I know. And they were basically, just on the stage, like telling them about, because their school's one of the highest walking and cycling schools in the UK.
Which school is that?
It's Fulford in York. Something to do with the built environment around there is really good for walking and cycling. There's loads of like stuff in the 20th century. They built loads of like off-road cycle routes, and it just enabled everyone to cycle and walk to school. So yeah, it's cool. And they had those kids there, which is cool. They were all on stage building the perfect street on this like tool. Yeah, but I
think high schools are, there's been a lot of focus, hasn't there, on school streets, which is generally primary schools. But considering where we live, has some of the best segregated bike infrastructure across Greater Manchester. There aren't a lot of kids cycling to the school.
No.
There aren't a lot of bikes locked up in the bike park. So that's future work.
Yeah, definitely.
Isn't it? But,
yeah. But yeah, and I think we're going to wrap it up there. And it was really good to hear about the future plans, because I think a lot of people are itching. Like, people keep asking me, what's going on with Kidical Mass? What's going on? And I don't know. Like, I need to come and hear from you.
It's taken us a bit of time.
Yeah.
A lot happened very quickly. And I think when something like that happens very quickly, and, that you kind of take stock of it, it needs a bit of time to just work out what it means. Not forget about it. And I think we have naturally come to a point where we're like, right, okay, yeah, I think, we're ready to.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what Naz has in store, if I'm honest, and you and the rest of it, those people. We've been working at Eid Cycle Fest each year, and I know that's the future for pushing this further forward and bringing those inequalities down. Everyone deserves good cycle lanes, everyone deserves quiet streets, everyone deserves a school street. So we're excited to see that expand across the city, and then our jobs will be done.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Layla.
Thanks.